Good morning, everybody. I appreciate you joining us. We're going to be talking today about magnetic flow meter calibration verification. So up here, I just have a little information on myself, my background. I've been working with flow meters for 39 years, since 1981, when I graduated college. Been working with flow meters and have a lot of experience with them. So we have the opportunity to ask questions throughout, and what you'll see, Ryan, I hope you started the recording. What you'll see is a little bubble where you can ask questions. It's the chat box. So if you have any questions, just click on that, and you can enter in any questions that you have at any time. So we're going to focus on the top 4 manufacturers of mag meters. There are a lot of different mag meter manufacturers out there today, and it would take too much time to handle them all. So we're just going to look at the top 4 major manufacturers. We're going to start with Siemens, because that's what I am specifically trained on and experienced with. So I'm going to start with Siemens, talk about how they do it, and then I'm going to get into the methods used and the differences in the methods used by the other manufacturers. We're going to get into a list of pertinent questions that you as a user or a specifier might want to ask of a potential supplier. And throughout, we'll have an opportunity where we'll break and answer questions from the audience. So first thing that we want to point out is that a verification is not a calibration. This is it's frequently confused as a calibration, but what it actually is you're verifying that the original factory calibration is still valid. So just to make sure that nobody confuses this is a verification of the calibration. The question that we might ask is, why is it that we need to verify? The simple question, the obvious one, or the simple answer, is that you want to verify that you're accurately metering flow in your pipe. It will also provide a means of getting a third-party certification that your meter is in fact flowing accurately or measuring accurately. And that's something that you can give to either a governing body or to a customer that you're billing. That could be a product that you're selling, or it could be if you're a municipality and there's a small neighboring municipality who doesn't have their own treatment plant. They pump it into your plant and you treat it for them. You bill them for it. So you want to be able to prove to them that what you're billing them for is an accurate measurement. A unique advantage and side benefit is that it allows you to verify proper installation, operation, and wiring. It also saves money in comparison to what I see as a typical method. What's always been done in the past is hiring a guy to come in with a portable flow meter, clamping it on, and doing a comparison test. We're gonna talk a little bit more about the differences between doing that clamp-on test versus using a verification. And it also saves you time, improves the speed in comparison to doing the clamp-on test. It also reduces or completely eliminates, depending on what level of involvement you get in the verification. It could eliminate your dependence on outside contractors to be able to do that meter verification. And finally, it also allows you to document the setup parameters in that meter, so that if you ever needed to look back at that, how is that set up? You have now a written record of that. So here's a question we get asked a lot. We always hire a third party to verify our meters. They bring a clamp on and verify the mag. Why is this better? Well, accuracy is the big answer. Here we have accuracy chart for a clamp-on flow meter. So typically, looking at like a DN100 is a 4-inch meter, a 400 is a 16-inch meter. If you're looking at line sizes in that range, you'll see that this is my 1 meter per second velocity point. So at that 1 meter per second velocity, I'm up at about 1.5% error on a 4-inch meter. On a 16-inch meter, I'm right about at 1% error. But as I get down at like 1 foot per second, that velocity starts to drop off rather quickly, as you see. So this is the accuracy that people will give you when you talk about a clamp-on meter. But what does that mean? Hey, it's how accurate your clamp-on meter? Well, it's 1%. So we offer clamp-on meters, and if you ask, we'll say 1%. But what depends on what you're asking. That 1% is a velocity measurement. So the way a clamp-on meter works is it takes a velocity measurement and then it multiplies it times the full cross-sectional area of your pipe. You have to enter very accurate data about your inside diameter of that pipe in order to get any kind of accuracy in your flow measurement. Any inaccuracies in your ID of that pipe, any scaling that you have on the inside of the pipe, that adds to the inaccuracy of that 1% velocity measurement. So you have to add that in. Plus you look at that accuracy statement, that 1% is at that 3 feet per second velocity, and it drops off quickly when you get below that. Here's the big thing, your straight run. So a mag meter uses 5 diameters up, 3 diameters down in order to get your stated accuracies. So the difference between that and a clamp-on is that the clamp-on is typically asking for 10 diameters up and 5 down. And the big bugaboo is that I've already used my best piping location. If I installed that mag meter properly, I've already used that to install the mag meter. So the clamp-on is going to have less straight run than the mag meter, but it requires more. So you have more inaccuracy added to it yet. The mag verifications that we're going to talk about today have accuracies that are going to range between 0.2% of rate and 2%, and that's going to be far better than any clamp-on. This is what calibration standards ask for. They say that if you're going to use one device to calibrate another, it should be at least 4 times more accurate than the device being calibrated. So the typical method of using the clamp-on to verify the calibration of a mag meter is just backwards in so many ways, in the straight run and the accuracy, etc. So another reason that you want to do this is in order to get third-party certification. So a lot of my customers have told me, no, I need to have that guy come in with the clamp-on because the governing agent says I need third-party certification. They think that hiring that guy to come in is their means of getting that third party. Well, NIST is your third party, or there are other traceable certifications there. The Siemens certification is NIST. And NIST is not only an acceptable third party, they are the third party in the United States governing weights and measures. So even if you purchase your own verificator and you run your own test, you print that cert with that NIST traceability, that is your third party cert. It doesn't necessarily mean somebody who doesn't work for the same employer that you work for. Before we get into exactly how the verificators work, I want to run through some background on how a mag meter works. So a mag meter works based on principle of Faraday's Law. And Faraday's Law says that if I have a magnetic field and I push a conductive media through that magnetic field, I will produce a measurable voltage. So with a magmeter, what we're doing is we're using Faraday's Law. We have coils here and here that produce that magnetic field, and then we have electrodes that across here between my electrodes, we measure the voltage induced by means of having that conductive media, which is your product, whatever you're flowing through it. Could be wastewater or sludge or acid or bleach, whatever that particular media is. So we measure the velocity there and then multiply that times the cross-sectional area of the pipe. The reason this is a lot more accurate than a Clampon ultrasonic, which also starts by a velocity measurement and then multiplies by the cross-sectional area of the pipe, is that we supply the pipe and we know exactly what the inside diameter is, and that is what was used during the calibration of that meter. So we supplied the pipe during the original calibration and we give it to you. So what makes up a flow meter system? So a complete flow meter consists of a sensor or a mag tube. This guy down here, that's your sensor, and a transmitter. And depending on whether you use a compact meter like this, where it's all in one, or if you remote mount, which is what we typically do, is remote mount one if it's installed, say, in just a not easily accessed area. Possibly it's in a pit. If you're in a pit, you might flood it. You're going to have to remote mount it because we can make the sensor tube, we can make that submersible, but we can't make our transmitter submersible. So then you're going to have a cable. So all three pieces should be tested when you're doing that. Verification. I'm going to take a quick break here for any questions we have so far. Do we have any questions yet, Brian?
Yeah, Sean, you have your first question. It's from Jeff Kaufman. He asked you to explain how grounding rings remove electrical interference.
Okay. Jeff, grounding rings remove electrical interference by being a ground reference for the mag tube. And I'm so glad you asked that because it's very important, because I'd say that easily half of the mag meters I see installed in the field are not properly grounded. People commonly confuse mag meter grounding with electrical grounding, and they're totally different. So a mag meter grounding, typically we're going to have a ground ring on this side and a ground ring on this side, and we tie that over to the pipe flange, the mag meter flange. So what we're doing is we're removing any electrical noise that might be coming down the pipe from being measured inside that mag meter. So if I go and look at that last slide in that picture, so we're measuring voltage across these electrodes, and if I have voltage being induced upon the in the pipe from just coming down the tube, that voltage is going to be measured by those electrodes, and it will look like velocity. So that's what the grounding does for us, is it removes any stray voltages from the measurement inside the mag tube. Anything else, Ryan? We good to go?
You're good to keep going, Sean.
Okay, so we're going to get into the first verification. This is the Siemens Verificator. So this is an instrument that comes in a little suitcase, exactly as it looks, and you're going to get multiple pieces that come with it. These cables are going to connect onto this piece right here, which is going to mount where your transmitter used to be, and then your transmitter is going to mount right on here during the test. That's a part number in case anybody's interested in it. That's how you would order one of these devices. These work on Siemens Magmeters that date back to 2001. You didn't need to order anything special on that Magmeter if you bought it anywhere from week 22 of 2001 to up till yesterday. It just is capable of being used with a verificator as long as it looks like this or like this. This is the rack mount style. So this can be either integral or remote. This one is remote only because it mounts in a rack. If you have one that looks like this or this, it doesn't work with the verificator. Talk to your salesperson about that. So every Magmeter comes with a traceable cert. And all four of the manufacturers that we talk about today are going to give you a cert that is traceable to NIST when you get your Magmeter. And the unique thing that Siemens does is we use a technique that we call fingerprinting the mag tube that we do at the time of calibration. So the way a fingerprint works is we measure that magnetic signature of that particular precise mag tube, and we burn that in then on a sensor prom that stays with that meter. And that's a non-changeable, non-tamperable value that stays in that meter. And that's what we use for comparison later on when we do the test. So included on that sensor prom is the calibration, all the data on that mag tube. It tells it, okay, I'm a 16-inch meter, I have an ebonite liner, I have Hastelloy C electrodes, all my calibration information, but it also includes user program data. So when you get that meter and you get it in and you set it up and you say, okay, I want my 20 milliamp point to be at, say, 3000 GPM. You set up your totalizers to go, say, net flow, etc. You set that up. That's programmed into the sensor prom, so that if anything happens to your transmitter, if it gets taken out by lightning in a storm in the middle of the night, if you have a spare transmitter, all you need to do is run out there, power the unit down, plug the new transmitter in, power it back up, and all the information gets uploaded from this sensor prom into the new transmitter, and you don't need to do so much as push a single button. So when we plug this guy in the field and do a test, we're actually doing 3 separate tests. It's all automatic once you hit go, and it'll go through and it'll do a transmitter test, an insulation test, and a magnetism test. All told, once you hit go, the test takes about 15 minutes. So these are the tests broken down. Test number 1 is your signal converter test. So that's our transmitter. It's testing our transmitter. And it tests the electronic accuracy. It measures the input to output, gain, linearity, offset. It also does a full flow simulator. So when we do the simulator, we're doing 3 different velocities here. And we measure the analog and the frequency outputs and compare them against where they should be and make sure that everything's operating all within the parameters. The second test is the magnetism test. I'm sorry, the insulation test. So there's 2 different insulation tests we're doing. One is the mag tube itself, where we're measuring the insulation in the mag tube to make sure that that's all still holding up and functioning the way it should. But the other is the cable. So with our typical cable that we supply between a remote mounted mag tube and a remote mount transmitter, we have 10 conductors in there. So there's 3 cables, 3 conductors in one of the cables, each with an individual shield and then an overall shield. And then the second cable has 2 conductors plus an overall shield. So this test is the equivalent of disconnecting all 10 conductors on both ends and then doing a ring out where you're testing for continuity and opens in those conductors. The final test is the magnetism test, where we test the sensor's magnetic properties. So we do what's called a boost test, explained further here. So if you look at the magnetism, that magnetic field in a magmeter, it's not a solid, consistent, always on magnetism. We ramp up that magnetic field and then collapse it. And then we just keep repeating that. We ramp it up, collapse it, ramp it up, collapse it. So the boost test is they boost the voltage until you get a stable magnetic field and then measure the rise time. And you're measuring that rise time against that fingerprint and making sure that that magnetic field is still acting the way it did when it was brand new, sitting on the flow calibration lab back in the factory. So this is what it looks like. Your transmitter, when it's operating, would be plugged right onto this piece right here. When you do the calibration, you unplug it, you bring it on over here, you plug it onto the verificator, and then you have these cables that come over and plug on where the transmitter normally sits, power it back up, hit start, and you're off to go. And that's that test 15 minutes later should say passed. Hopefully everything worked well for you, and you get this NIST traceable cert. Notice that this verificator, my note down here, we have to send this back every year and recertify that. And without that, we couldn't offer this NIST traceable certification. I point that out in contrast to other techniques that you'll see later on in the presentation. So these are some possible faults that you get. And the reason I point these out is, Mike Barton is on here today. He's a instrument tech in charge of multiple water and wastewater plants, and they own their own verificator. And he does something pretty cool is when they get new meters in, say on a project, and their contractor installed, before he signs off on a meter, he comes over and he runs a verificator test on it. And we found some pretty unique things there. We found some miswiring that has happened. And we had one that was not grounded properly. Things that are doing that is they were still working. The meters were giving us readings. They were still working. They weren't that far off, but they weren't within originally factory accuracy. So he just, at that point, he gets to go back to the contractor and say, put this on your punch list. And that's their headache instead of them inheriting that headache. So they don't sign off and take ownership until they complete a successful verification. It's great, smart way to do it. This is a picture of the Cal Cert that you're going to get. And this is the information. You get the customer information, the user information up here, all the identifying factors on the MagFlow meter itself, your pass or fail results, of course, gives you all your setup data, your totalizers, how they're operating, where they stand right now. And then additional information, your name, whoever ran the test, any comments that you want to add in there, and then an action menu. So this certification, I stress this a lot, it is NIST traceable. And in addition, it certifies that that magmeter is still at the original accuracy that it came from the factory. So we have 2 different accuracies. If you have a Mag 6000 transmitter on there, your accuracy is plus or minus 0.2% of rate. If you have the 5,000 transmitter, it's plus or minus 0.4% of rate. So that's an important question to ask, is what accuracy are you verifying? Because on some of them, and I've been through a lot of manuals just front to back, some of them it's kind of hard to tell what's being verified. Okay, before I get into the next technique used, let's see if there are any new questions.
Yeah, Sean, your only additional question was a follow-up to the grounding rings. David Ojeda asked if meters mounted in PVC or other non-metallic pipes require grounding.
It's not as critical, but it's still a nice thing to have. You want the grounding rings on there. There are certain mag tubes that you can buy. That one that I pointed out from Siemens, that 5100W mag tube, it has internal grounding electrodes. Ryan, what's your experience with plastic pipe then?
Yeah, I always recommend grounding rings in plastic or non-metallic pipe.
Okay, so we're going to get into the next manufacturer. I'm just going to call them Brand E. They use what they call heartbeat technology. So what is heartbeat technology? Heartbeat technology uses internal diagnostics inside the meter itself, coupled with a computer software for the calibration verification. So they work with the current generation meters anywhere from a ProMag 100 through a ProMag 400. It will not work with the older meters. It does provide a traceable cert. Their cert is traceable to ISO 9001. And I find this interesting because this is new to me to see a traceability to ISO. ISO, everything that I've seen from ISO up to this date has been certifying a procedure. And that's really what this is too, is it's a procedure for the calibration. But, you know, back when ISO first came on the forefront, it became a big thing. Hey, is your manufacturing facility ISO certified? Well, in order to become ISO certified, you had to come up with a written procedure, documented procedure on how that product is manufactured. And you had to follow that procedure into manufacturing. Funny thing about that is there was nothing about that ISO certification that guaranteed you any level of quality. If that product that was manufactured was just a total piece of garbage, that ISO certification guaranteed you that you would make that total piece of garbage exactly the same way every time. So that's going to be up between you and your governing body or your own personal acceptance as to whether you want to accept an ISO cert versus an NIST cert. With the ProMag meters, your printed cert, you're either going to need to go through the web server or the Field Care, which is their device management software. And note that this testing will not test your cable. So if you really want to be certain that you're metering properly and you do that, you're going to have to test that cable on your own. They have self-diagnostics that can run continuously or on demand. If you want to do the verification of the calibration, that's the on demand. The self-diagnostics I'll talk about a little bit further in just a minute. Several of these manufacturers, and Brand E being one of them, will require you or ask you to run a benchmark when you first start up the test. And that is up to the user to, when you first install that meter and start it, to go ahead and run this verification and then say, okay, this is my benchmark. and then you use that for comparison on future verifications. This is important. You want to order this EB option if you want to get the ability to verify. If you don't have that option, you will not have the ability to verify. Heartbeat technology is the overall technology that they use. They break it down into 3 different bits. So you have heartbeat diagnostics. Heartbeat diagnostics is in every meter. And any of those ProMad 100 through 400s that you buy, they're going to have the heartbeat diagnostics. The heartbeat monitoring and the heartbeat verification are options, and that's what you need to do, get that EB option that I talked about last slide in order to get that. So the monitoring is interesting because it sounds kind of cool. You have continuous monitoring, but when you get into it and you look at it, it gets kind of complex. It's continuous output of monitoring measured values for monitoring in an external monitoring system. You're going to need to know what you're doing in order to do that. I'll get more detail on the next slide on that. Heartbeat verification is where you verify the calibration, and that's the manual on-demand verification. Note the note out of the manual. It's recommended to use the heartbeat verification for the first time directly as part of the commissioning routine. There's another note where they tell you need to do that. And I'm putting these duplicating notes up there because later on in the manual, I get this note. It is not necessary to commission heartbeat verification function. The configuration factory reference required as heartbeat is recorded during calibration at the factory and is permanently stored in the measuring device. So if I were going to use one of these meters, I would kind of want to talk to somebody who knows more about them than I do, somebody at the factory, and say, which part of this manual do I pay attention to? This part or this part? So the monitoring I mentioned can get kind of complex. This is what you're doing. So I've got 3 different parameters. I have a noise parameter, coil current shot time, and reference electrode potential against PE. These are my value ranges that I output, and I then have to take that to an external monitoring device and set a threshold somewhere here that is going to tell me, okay, I want to be above or below this value. So all I can tell you is I've been working 39 years with magmeters, and I'm going to set my noise value somewhere between 0 and 3 times 10 to the 38th. I am clueless. Don't know where between 2 and 500 milliseconds I need to set a current shot time. I'm sure somebody technical at the factory can help you with that. But it gets a little more complex than just, hey, it's automatic full-time monitoring. So they also talk about different types of verification. And they have an internal verification, which is performed automatically by the device. And you don't need to do any measurements whatsoever. Or you have an external verification, which is similar, but with the external verification, you need to make some process measurements yourself. You need to get your digital voltmeter out there and measure some currents and voltages and resistances. And then you enter those measured values into the computer. as you run that test, and then you get your pass-fail. So I just don't know what to tell you about this, because nowhere in the manual does it tell you, hey, these are the advantages or disadvantages of internal versus external. I have to believe that there is some advantage to doing the external, because it's more complex, it's more work. There's got to be some advantage, or they just wouldn't offer it. But I don't know what that is, and they don't spell that out in the manual. That would be up to the user to determine, get some answers on that. So I got some other conflicting information about who is qualified to do this service. So when you look at that verificator that I showed you, that Siemens offers, anybody can do that. An end user can go out and buy their own and operate that device. You don't need any certifications for it. On the bottom of their certificate, they have this note: validity of the verification report is only given, well, this isn't obvious, for devices with heartbeat verification enabled software option. You wouldn't have been able to run it if you didn't have that. Or for verifications carried out by the manufacturer's service or authorized service provider. And then later in the manual, I get this note: prerequisite for the validity of the verification, the function must be activated on the measuring device concerned and performed by an operator tasked to carry out this job by the customer. That seems a little bit less intrusive than the first one. And then later on, you get this note that says no special knowledge is required on the part of the user. So once again, guys, I just have to say, check with your manufacturer, ask them which part of the manual to refer to and which one is correct. This is their cert. This is the calibration cert that comes with the heartbeat verification report. Down here where I have the arrow, this is where I took that snippet on that note where it says for verification carried out by factory service. Last but not least, when I look at this, I look at this and I say, okay, so I'm dependent upon circuitry that's inside that meter to verify that other circuitry inside the very same meter is still functioning properly. The circuitry that I'm depending on has been installed in the same meter for the same amount of time, exposed to the same environmental elements. So it's up to the user to determine whether you're going to be comfortable with that or not. And we're going to get into brand R, another technique that uses the computer software. Internal circuitry coupled with computer software. Again, it tests the mag tube, it tests the mag transmitter, does not test the cable. You're going to have to do your own cable tests. Now they tell you that the verification can be run continuously or manually. So unlike brand E, they had monitoring that could run continuously in the background. Brand R says the verification can be run continuously in the background. If you want that cert, that's only available with the manual verification. Also, if you want to run that manual verification that's required in order to get that cert, you must order it with the remote transmitter. So this picture up here that shows the integral transmitter, you would not be able to get a Cal cert with that device. So order it with a remote transmitter if that's what you want. And in addition to ordering a remote transmitter, you're going to need to order DA2, D02, MV. So make sure that if you're purchasing or specifying one of these meters and you want to be able to verify it in the future, you want to make sure that you have those options. They do give you the option I don't know if I mentioned this on Brand E or not, but Brand E also gives you the option. If you didn't purchase it up front, you can go back and purchase it later on and do a field installation of that ability to be able to verify. So in their manual, they say, how do you set it up? Well, first you make sure that you have it available. You have these options. Then you establish the sensor signature as a baseline for comparison. Should be taken during the startup process when the transmitter is first connected to the sensor with a full line and ideally with no flow in the line. Throughout their manual, I see a lot of things saying we don't want flow in the line, or flow in the line is you're better without flow in the line. They want a full pipe, but they don't want flow in the line. And then they ask you to determine your test criteria. So on this one, you set your values as to what accuracy that you want to be able to verify. And from what I can see, that's somewhere between 1 and 10%. Anybody have an instrument that they installed, it's brand spanking new, and you install it and you find out, wow, this thing got damaged in shipment. And it's not working right. And sometimes, especially on a project, you might get a bunch of magmeters delivered and they sit there for several months, in some cases years, before they actually get installed. So when you're doing the baseline, when you first compare it, you're kind of throwing the dice on what you're doing to make sure to make sure that you're not taking a baseline, an instrument that's already damaged. And if that's what every meter is compared against, what every verification is compared against in the future, you're comparing against an already damaged meter. So the idea of taking a baseline upon installation and being that incumbent upon the user can be a little scary. If you think you have, you're certain that you're going to get to that and do it quickly, then that might not be an issue for you. But again, they say how much the sensor calibration is shifted from the original baseline signature. So they give 3 different methods or conditions for running the validation, the verification. This is what they really want, no flow. So they say run the smart meter verification with a full pipe and no flow in the line. Under this test under this condition provides the most accurate results and the best indication of the mag flow meter health. Flowing full. So I've done a whole bunch of verifications through the years, and I don't know of one of them that we ever had the luxury of being able to go up and stop the flow to be able to run it. I've always done it under flowing conditions. And they give you some cautions here. Running under flowing conditions can cause false fails of the verification test if the flow rate is not steady. When is flow steady? Or if the process noise is present. So you get cautions on that, but they tell you they can do it. And then they tell you can run it with an empty pipe. But you also get a little caveat here. It says, it will not check the electrode circuit health and may result in false fails of the transmitter verification. The thing that's important here is if your electrodes aren't properly reading, you're not getting an accurate measurement. There are a lot of things that can happen to those electrodes. They can get coated. So if you could have an excessive grease coating and an insulating coating that throws your accuracy off. You could have an excessive conductive coating on there that throws your accuracy off. They could just be corroded. And without checking that, you really don't have a true check on the accuracy of your flow meter. These are the smart meter verification test criteria. You'll need to go in and set these up on your unit when you first start to say, okay, if I do a test full pipe with no flow, I want to set my parameters up at 1%, 2%, 10%, etc. Full pipe with flow, again, between 1 and 10, but again, you get the caution on if you are flowing, you're gonna get more noise. And then they give you the empty pipe limit. So down here is the caution. If the tolerance band is set too tightly under empty pipe conditions or noisy flow conditions, a false failure of the transmitter may occur. And when it's all said and done, this is what you're after. This is your cert. Notice that this one says that the limit is 5%. So this certifies that your meter that you paid for 0.5% accuracy certifies that you're within 5%. So it's up to you as to what you want to certify for, the original accuracy or something different than that. Examples are given in the manual, and they give 3 examples. They start with a food and beverage company. The plant standard calls for the accuracy to be 3% or better, but they operate in batches. So they can never have the pipe full while a batch is in process. They can't run the measurement while the batch is in process. So they set the test criteria up for empty pipe, and they set it for 3%, but it should be noted that the electrode circuit health cannot be verified. That's a individual decision as to whether you want to trust that or not if you can't test the electrodes. Another example is a wastewater plant. An effluent meter must be certified annually, but only 5%, and they're still flowing. So they say set the test criteria for full flowing, full to 5%, and you'll meet the requirements of that government agency. The last one, they choose a pharmaceutical company. Guys, in the metrology world, no one is tighter than pharmaceutical companies. What they have us do on temperature measurements is crazy. They are so technical and they get so tight on the measurements. And on this one, they give a verification test run under no flow conditions and set the test criteria for no flow and 1%. So they're going to verify now that that meter is within 1%. And looks like they have to set to no flow to do that. I don't know that for certain, but that's the impression I get through reading through the manual. All right, we are up to brand A. There's.
Do you want to take any questions, or do you want to hold off until then?
Go ahead.
Okay. So some of these I've answered in the chat, but I'll let you tell everyone. Thomas Brown asked, does the temperature of the fluid have any effect on the accuracy of the test? Referring to the verificator.
The temperature of the fluid is not going to change the accuracy of your test. You just need to make sure that you keep the temperature of fluid within the ratings of that particular magmeter.
The verificator also has a max process temperature rating of 140 degrees F. Then we have a follow-up or a question from Freddie Gonzalez. He asked if the Siemens flow meter can have Profinet protocol.
The Siemens does not offer Profinet directly. We have Profibus, but as of now, if we need Profinet, we do that with an external module.
Then a follow-up question from Freddie is, can we do Modbus and 4 to 20 in the transmitter at the same time?
We cannot. We can do Modbus or 4 to 20. When you use a communication protocol other than HART, you give up the 4 to 20.
Sean, I believe that you are able to still get a 4 to 20 output while using Modbus.
Oh, well, if you know that, that's news to me. I know I can't with Profibus.
Second, another question from Adam Smith and Ian Bostwick. He says he has an influent meter at a wastewater plant and they're inaccurate due to air. Is there anything he can do in the meter programming to help with this issue?
If it's air and there's excessive aeration, you really need to put an air relief valve in before the meter. Most of the mag meters are going to react to that the same way. And there's nothing that we can do in the programming of the meter to say, hey, ignore the air.
And then the final question that we have here is, does the verificator check the digital pulse output?
Yes, it does.
All right, that's it for now.
So the digital pulse output, I should say that the digital pulse output is it's user programmable as either a pulse or a frequency. And that is checked during the verification. Okay, so I'm going to move on to brand A. Years ago, they offered a unit called a CalMaster. It's no longer offered, but I wanted to bring it up because the CalMaster was a separate device, very similar to the verificator. And this separate device had to be sent back every year and recertified, and they did offer an NIST traceable cert, and they did certify to the original accuracy when they did that. Little note that they had in their documentation: annual certification of the CalMaster system ensures complete documentation for regulatory agencies. So they did away with this. That date might not be right, but it's close, somewhere around 2012. And that's the old CalCert traceable to NIST that they had in original accuracy. So there's still some of these out there. You might see them around. So I thought they were worth mentioning. But the current method used by this manufacturer is what they call VeraMaster Software. So this is back to a software program similar to what the last two manufacturers provided. And with the VeraMaster software, it only works with the current WaterMaster series. And this is not backward compatible with the older meters, nor is the old CalMaster forward compatible to the WaterMaster. So if you're buying new meters, you need VeraMaster software. If you have the old meters, you need the CalMaster. Note that this system is not a standalone system. It requires manual resistance, current, and frequency measurements. So what I talked about with one of the other manufacturers, where they had both the internal and external options, this isn't an option on this. It requires these measurements. The V3 option has to be ordered with your Magmaster meter if you want to be able to use VeraMaster software. If you have the V3 option by itself, you can certify that meter to be within plus or minus 2% accurate. If you get the V3 and the VO, which is their version of fingerprinting the meter, then you get that and you can certify up to plus or minus 1%. So the accuracies on the meters by this manufacturer, the accuracies offered are 0.2% and 0.4% baseline accuracies. But the best you can get is 1%. So if you have a billing meter, which is typically why people boost up to the 0.2% meter, you have a billing meter and you paid a little extra to get that, the best you can do on your verification is 5 times the 0.2% that you paid for up front. Again, it does not test the cable. You're responsible for doing your own cable test. And down here, I talk about the internal test because they give no spec for the accuracy or certification of that external test instrument. And most people, when you're doing certification of the measurements, if you're doing certification of that instrument with that device, you want to use a certified test instrument. And that's a question you might ask yourself. Are you certifying your test instrument? And why is it okay to use non-certified test instruments for this? And you know, the big thing about external values is, in order to properly verify a calibration and provide a cert to a government entity, they generally know that there was no ability to tamper with those results whatsoever. And I just look at this and say it might open you up to, okay, the operator ran the test and they measured 7.6 milliamps and they got a fail, and they looked at it and said, you know, I'm going to tell it measured 7.7 milliamps and see what that does. Hey, look at that, I got a pass. It's not a good thing to open yourself up to potential tampering. So that's a copy of the cert. They certify to OIML, and that's an OML Class 2. So that's plus or minus 2%. If you ordered it with the fingerprint, that VO option, you could get Class 1 in there instead, and that OIML Class 1 is within plus or minus 1%. So anybody out there know what OIML is, who they are, what they stand for? OIML is the Organisation Internationale de Metrologie Légale. Sorry, that's my best French accent. They're a French organization. That's a question that the user needs to answer. Are they okay with a French organization, or maybe your government entity, maybe EPA or whoever it is that you're looking at? Hey, do you want that, or do you want NIST, which is the standard within the United States? And I'm going to just wrap up with, if you're looking to buy a mag meter and you're interested in possibly verifying it in the future, these are questions that you might want to ask your potential supplier. Make sure that you know what options you need to order and what equipment you need to be able to calibrate the meter in the future. Ask if you can print a cert and what equipment you need to do that. Will it be traceable to NIST? And if not NIST, to what agency will that be traceable? And what accuracy are you verifying? You're going to be able to verify my original accuracy. If not, tell me what accuracy I can get. Might also ask, do I need to stop flowing the pipe to get that? Are you going to test the entire system? Will I need to do a baseline during startup? That's something that would be really good to get nailed down ahead of time. Again, can I do it while I'm flowing? What's the downside to that? And would it be possible to possibly compromise the results by entering false information? So that's all I have for today. It's 10 o'clock now, so our time is up, but I'll stick around and answer any questions anyone has.
Yeah, Sean, so you do have 3 more questions. First one comes from Javier. He says he has a mag meter that will be out of service for several months. Which is preferred, to leave the tube full or empty, and the meter will stay powered?
It doesn't matter to the meter. You can leave it empty, but if you don't have empty pipe detection turned on, you're going to get some flaky numbers. I was at a plant years ago where I was up there looking at some other stuff, and I asked them when I was done, is everything else working? And they said, yeah, everything but that magic meter. And I said, what does that mean? They said, well, we have a mag meter that's got nothing flowing, but it's been measuring flow for the past year, and that process is shut down. So I said, can I please go look at it? And I asked him, I said, is anything in the pipe at all? I know the process is shut down. He goes, no, the pipe's empty. So we just went through the menu, turned on empty pipe detection, and the flow reading went to 0. So that's the only downside to leaving it empty.
All right, your next question is from Andre. He asks, is Profinet integration into Siemens flow meters planned for future models?
The answer is yes, it is planned for future models, but I could not tell you where that is in the future.
Next question from John. What are some results of cable failure? Is it always lower readings?
I think the results of the cable failure can be all over the board. I wouldn't want to say it's always lower. As I think about that, I have to think most failures are going to be lower. I'd have to get back to you on that one.
Okay. And that's all the questions. I just wanted to, actually just had one come in. We are relocating a 20-year-old pipe with a flow meter on it. Do you recommend a new meter versus reusing the old meter?
If it's 20 years old, I would recommend it. You're already doing the work to move the pipe. Whoever asked that question, can you tell us what size that pipe is?
While we're waiting on that, two clarifications, or one clarification. We did confirm that you can use both Modbus and 4-20 at the same time on our transmitters. And Sean Michael Barton brought up the fact that if you save your TST files after you do a verification, it can be very beneficial for the future for troubleshooting, so you can compare against past values.
Oh, good point, Mike. Thank you for pointing that out.
And we just got an answer. It's an 18-inch flow meter.
Okay, so the reason I asked the size is, you know, if you're relocating a 2-inch pipe and you still have an operating and functional mag meter, by all means, keep it, use it, you know, let it go. But if it's an 18-inch meter, there's a lot of work to installing an 18-inch mag meter. It's quite heavy. And if you're going to have to go and pull a 20-year-old mag meter and reinstall it on an 18-inch pipe, I'd say that meter owes you nothing. It's done a pretty good job for 20 years. I would personally, as long as I had the money to be able to purchase a new meter, I would replace the meter.
That's everything we've got, Sean.
All right, everybody, thank you very much for joining us. I hope it was beneficial for you. And if you have any follow-up questions, you can either contact me or your local Gilson salesperson. Thank you. Have a great day.